The boy's voice barely cleared the swinging doors. "Mister, please, sir, may we have your leftovers?" He stood half inside the saloon and half out, in trousers cinched with plow rope. Behind him, a smaller boy clutched the back of his shirt. Behind that boy stood a little girl of maybe 5 with eyes set so deep in her skull they looked like dark stones at the bottom of a well. 3 of them, skin pulled tight on their cheekbones. The kind of thinness you see in coyotes who have outlasted a winter, and just barely. The bartender, a square-faced man named Otis Greer, looked up from the glass he was polishing. He did not shout. He just said, "No children in the Silver Spur. House rule. Get on out before I tell you twice." At a table in the back corner, a man in a long brown duster lifted his eyes. He had been turning a shot of rye in slow circles, without drinking it for the better part of an hour. He had not said a word since he came in. He did not say a word now. He just looked. And what he saw in those 3 faces made the muscles in his forearms go so tight the buttons on his cuffs strained against the cloth. Stay with me on this one. Because the man at that corner table owned more cattle than anybody west of the Powder River, and what he was about to do over the next 3 months would set every tongue in Wyoming spinning until they did not know which way was up. The little girl took a step back into her brother, and the older boy caught her shoulder without looking. He kept his other hand on the doorframe like the doorframe was the only thing keeping him standing. Otis Greer set his glass down and sighed. "Look, son, I got men drinking in here. Go around to the alley behind the Chinaman's laundry. Sometimes he puts out food his customers didn't take. Now move." The older boy nodded once. The nod of someone who had been dismissed in many doorways already. He turned his brother and sister around with one careful hand on each of their backs and walked them back out under the swinging doors. The doors thumped twice. The piano player picked up where he had left off. Somebody at the faro table laughed too loud. At the corner table, the man in the brown duster stood up. His name was Eli Kettering. He was 58 years old that fall. His hair under the wide black hat was the color of iron filings. His eyes were a flat blue, the kind of blue that came off a horizon in November when the sky had given up on color. He laid a gold half-eagle on the table for a shot of rye he had not touched, which was about 10 times what the rye was worth, and he walked out under the swinging doors without saying a word. Otis Greer watched him go, then looked at the gold piece and back at the doors and then at the gold piece again. In 9 years tending bar in Cottonwood Bend, he had seen Eli Kettering walk into the Silver Spur exactly 7 times. Kettering had never finished a drink, and he had never walked out while a man was talking to him. Otis Greer felt a small cold thing move down the back of his neck. Out on the boardwalk, the 3 children were already halfway down the block, heading for the alley. Eli Kettering caught up at the corner. He did not call out. He did not crouch down. He did not put on the smile grown men put on for hungry children. He had spent enough years watching horses to know an animal that had been beaten could smell a soft hand a long way off. He stood near them and took his hat off and said, in a voice like gravel through a sieve, "You 3 eaten today." The older boy stepped in front of the younger 2. "We ain't asking nothing from you, mister. We're going to the alley like the man said. I didn't ask where you were going. I asked if you had eaten." The older boy's mouth set in a hard line. He was perhaps 10. He had a small white scar that ran from the corner of his left eyebrow into his hairline. His jaw worked the way a jaw works when a person is trying to keep his face still, and his face will not stay still. The little girl said in a small, clear voice, "We ate part of an apple yesterday. From a tree. It was green." The older boy closed his eyes for one long second like that sentence had cut something inside him. Eli Kettering put his hat back on. "All right." The older boy opened his eyes. All right, what? All right, you come with me. I got a ranch out east of town. 2 hours by wagon. A kitchen. Beds. A woman who cooks for me named Han Olafson. You are free to come. You are free not to come. Free to leave in the morning if the place does not suit you. I ain't your kin. I ain't your law. I am a man with food and a roof, and no use for them tonight. The older boy stared up, searching the face for the thing he had learned to look for in grown men, the thing that meant a hand was going to come down later when the door was closed. He did not find it. He found instead a face that had been arranged a long time ago by hunger of its own, and remembered the shape of itself. Place called the Crooked K, mister. That's the one. I heard of it. I imagine you have. The little girl slipped her hand into Eli's without asking. It was the size of a teacup. It was the lightest thing he had ever held. Now here is what nobody in Cottonwood Bend knew. Eli Kettering had been a starving child himself. Outside Greenup in eastern Kentucky. Before the war, a boy of 8 had stood at the back door of a tavern called the Blue Heron and asked the cook for a heel of bread. The cook had told that boy he was a piece of trash that should have died with his mother, and slammed the door so hard it caught his shoulder and tore his only shirt. He had walked back to a cabin where his stepfather drank every night and beat the boy's grandmother every Sunday regular as church. The grandmother died of consumption that spring. The stepfather drank himself to death the year after. The boy took the grandmother's egg money and walked west until West ran out of road, and then kept walking. He hired on to drive cattle at 11. He had never told this story to a soul. Not to his foreman Hod Yancey, who had ridden with him 26 years. Not to his late wife Tirzah, who had died of childbed fever 18 years ago, and the boy with her, both in the same bed. Tirzah had once asked him in the dark, "Why do you always set such a long table when there ain't nobody but the two of us, Eli?" He had told her, "Because once I would have crawled across a frozen river for what we throw to the hogs." She had held his hand in the dark and not said a thing after that. The wagon ride out to the Crooked K took the rest of the afternoon. The little girl fell asleep against Eli's arm before the cottonwoods. The middle boy fell asleep next. The older boy did not sleep. Eli said over his shoulder, "You can rest, son. Nobody is going to come on us between here and home." The older boy said, "With my brother and sister asleep, who's watching?" Eli thought about that for a quarter mile. Then he said, "Fair. You watch. I'll drive." The Crooked K sat in a broad bend of the Cheyenne River. The main house was 2 stories of log and stone with a wraparound porch. To the north stood the cookhouse, smoke rising from before dawn to after dark. To the west, 2 bunkhouses for the 17 men who worked the place. The older boy stood up in the wagon bed when he saw it. He didn't say a word. He just stood up. "Sit down, son. We're almost stopped." "Yes, sir." A woman came out onto the porch of the cookhouse. She was tall and sturdy, hair the color of pale straw, forearms like a blacksmith's. Her name was Han Olafson. She took one look at the wagon bed and one look at Eli's face. She did not ask a question. She went inside. By the time the wagon stopped, she was back with hot water, towels, and 3 tin cups of milk warmed with honey. "Wash up at the pump," Eli said. "Han will see to the rest." Han walked the children around to the pump. She did not speak to them the way grown people speak to children they wish to soothe. She spoke to them the way she spoke to her own brothers. She told the older boy his neck was the dirtiest neck she had seen in a calendar year. She told the middle boy his hair had something in it she did not wish to identify. She told the little girl her dress was past saving. Then Han fed them. Slow. A cup of thin broth first. Then bread, no butter yet. Then bread with butter. then a spoon of mashed potato, then a piece of chicken the size of a child's thumb, then stewed apples. Then she made them stop. The middle boy began to cry. Han put her arm around his shoulders. Child, hush. In 1 hour you may eat again, and 2 hours after that again. But if you eat all you wish right now, you will be sick on my floor. We eat like sailors after a long crossing. Little by little. You understand? He nodded. He stopped crying. Eli watched from the doorway as the 3 children ate the first proper meal they had eaten in he did not know how long. When the little girl finally laid her head on her arms and fell asleep with her hair in a smear of stewed apple, Han picked her up and carried her into the spare room. Then she came back for the middle boy. The older boy walked in on his own. Han pulled the quilt up to the little girl's chin. 3 of them, Mr. Kettering. 3. That is not a small thing. I know it is not. The little one. Have you looked at her eyes? I looked. Whoever has had charge of these children should answer for it. He will, Han. In the morning, Eli rode the 8 miles into town before sunup. He went into Sheriff Theodore Buford's office without knocking. Buford was just putting coffee on. He saw Eli's face and set the pot down. Theo, I picked up 3 children last night. Asked Otis Greer for leftovers at the Silver Spur. 2 boys and a girl. I took them out to the K. Has anybody come through asking after 3 children matching those? Buford looked at the wall. A man came through Saturday. Said he was looking for his brother's children. Offered a finder's fee of $200. Did you give him word? I gave him nothing. I did not like his hands. There was a worn place on the side of his right palm I have seen before on men who like to use a strap. He gave it as Mr. Cobb Drennan. Eli took his hat off and set it on the corner of the desk. Theo, if Drennan comes back through, you have not seen me. The Crooked K is a vague rumor to you. I understand. But Eli, if this man is the children's lawful kin, there is going to come a day when the law on my side of this desk will not allow me to be ignorant. I hear you. I am going to wire a Sack Crocker in Cheyenne this morning, and Judge Renton in Laramie. By the time Drennan finds those children, they will be wards of the federal court with adoption papers half drawn and a half mile of legal documents between his hand and their hair. Buford whistled. That is going to cost you. Theo, I have money I have not been able to spend in 20 years on anything except cattle and land. He walked out. That afternoon Eli sat down at the long pine table across from 3 clean children in clothes that had been Han's nephews. Han had set a plate in front of each. 1 biscuit, 1 piece of bacon, 1 small pile of scrambled egg. Eli took off his hat. Names, he said. If you'll tell me. The older boy was a long time answering. He looked at Eli, then at his brother, then at his sister, and Eli saw him decide that a name was something that could be given back if it was given to the wrong person. He gave it anyway. I'm Caleb. This is Joseph. The little one is Ruth. Caleb. Joseph. Ruth. I am Eli Kettering. This is Mrs. Olafson. There are 17 men on this ranch. If you wake afraid in the night, call out to Mr. Halloran. He will come. Yes, sir. I need to ask you some hard things, Caleb. Yes, sir. Where are your folks? Caleb's jaw worked. Dead. Both. Last spring. Fever went through our town. Took Mama first, Daddy a week behind. Where? Loup Forks. Nebraska. Who took you in after? Caleb did not answer. He looked at his biscuit. Caleb. Our uncle, Mama's older brother, Mr. Cobb Drennan. He has a place south of Sundance. He came down when he heard and took us up on the next train. He told the county judge he would raise us as his own, and the judge gave him us and the farm and whatever was in Mama's strongbox. How did he treat you? The little girl, Ruth, said in her small, clear voice. He made Joseph sleep in the hen house. Joseph did not look up. Caleb said, he is not a good man, mister. He drinks. When he drinks, he gets angry. When he gets angry, he beats us. He beats Joseph the most because Joseph will not cry. He beats Ruth when she will not eat what he has cooked, even when it is rotten. We left 12 days ago. I waited until he was drunk and took Joseph and Ruth, and we took the milk cow because the cow was slow enough for Ruth to walk beside. The cow gave out outside a town called Boggs. We rode part of the way in a freighter's wagon, who did not know we were there. We have been 4 days in Cottonwood Bend. Eli Kettering did not say anything for a long minute. Then he said, Caleb, look at me. Caleb looked up. You did right by your brother and your sister. You did exactly right. Every step of it. You hear me? Caleb nodded. His mouth was tight. He did not trust his voice. Your uncle is in this country. The sheriff told me this morning. He came through 4 days ago looking for you. Ruth's small face crumpled. Joseph went very still. He is not going to find you. If he comes up this road, he is not going to make it past the gate. There are 17 men on this place, and every one of them is going to know your faces and his face by tomorrow morning, and not one of them is going to let him near you. Caleb whispered, Mister. He will not stop. He told us 100 times if we ever tried to leave, he would track us down. He said no court would side with 3 orphans against an uncle with papers. Caleb, listen. I am 58 years old. I have buried a wife I loved more than the sun coming up. I have buried a son born and gone the same night, never given a name. I have nothing in this world I love except this ranch. As of last night, I have you and your brother and your sister. As of this morning, I have a lawyer on a train and a federal judge writing a paper in Laramie. There is no man on the Sundance Road and no man in this country who is taking you off this land while I am drawing breath. That is not a brag. That is a fact of arithmetic. Now eat your biscuit before Hand takes it away. Caleb looked at him for one long second. Then, for the first time since he had walked under the swinging doors of the Silver Spur, Caleb ate. If you are still with me on this one, hit that subscribe button right now. Because old Eli Kettering has not yet shown you what a quiet rich man can do with a federal judge in his pocket and 3 children to protect. 3 weeks went by. Ruth filled out first. She slept 10 hours a night and ate 4 meals a day. By the 3rd week, she was running barefoot in the kitchen yard, chasing a brown puppy named Skeeter. Joseph came back slower. He did not speak for the first week. He spoke to Skeeter first in whispers, then to a brown mare named Pansy, then to a young hand named Tully who taught him to coil a rope. By the end of the 3rd week, Joseph laughed at something Hand said at supper, and the entire cookhouse went silent for 1 second because nobody had yet heard the boy laugh. Caleb came back slowest. He still slept with 1 boot unlaced beside the bed. He still walked to the front gate twice a day to look down the road. The town did its talking. On a Saturday morning, a buggy came up the road from town. Reverend Aloysius Crane drove. Beside him sat Mrs. Margaret Vesper, chair of the Ladies' Civic League. Eli stood up from his rocker, but did not invite them down. The Reverend cleared his throat. Mr. Kettering, there are concerns in town. A widower of your age, living alone these many years, taking in 3 children of no blood relation. Without a wife in the house. There is talk. There would be. Mrs. Vesper, said Eli. There is a faction in town that will want those children placed somewhere more suitable. There is a Methodist home in Cheyenne. Mrs. Vesper. 3 years ago, when the school nearly closed for want of a stove that would not burn the schoolhouse down. Who paid for the new stove? You did, Eli. Reverend. Last winter, when the parsonage roof failed, and your wife was sleeping under 3 buckets through January. Who paid for the new roof? You did, Mr. Kettering. Then I will ask you both to turn that buggy around and tell the dry goods store and the ladies' league that the children at the Crooked K are at the Crooked K, and their last name as of next Wednesday is Kettering. If any of them ever sets foot in the schoolhouse, they will be welcomed like the children of the bank president. If any of them ever sets foot in the Methodist church, they will be welcomed like the children of the reverend. Is that understood? Yes, Mr. Kettering. Yes, Eli. Good morning to you both. The buggy turned and left. The other kind of trouble arrived on a Wednesday. It was a day in late October when the sky had gone the color of a dirty dish. Eli was on the porch with Caleb beside him on the step. Ruth was inside with Han. Joseph was in the corral with Tully. A man came up the lane on a tall sorrel horse. He wore a long black coat. He had a wide brown mustache and small close-set eyes the color of cold tea. He wore a Colt on his right hip and a holster that had been used. He rode up to the porch and did not get down. Afternoon. Eli did not move. Afternoon. You Kettering. I am. My name is Cobb Drennan. I have come up from Sundance. I am here for my brother's 3 children, who I have learned are on your premises. Caleb had gone perfectly still on the step. Eli put his left hand on the boy's shoulder. Caleb, go inside. Stay with Han in the cookhouse until I come for you. Sir, please. Caleb. Now. Caleb went inside. The screen door tapped shut. Eli stood up from his rocker. He set his coffee cup on the porch rail. He did this slowly. Mr. Drennan, you may step down and we may have words. You may stay on your horse and we may have shorter words. Drennan did not step down. I have come for my kin. I have papers from a county judge in Loop Forks naming me as their guardian. I have papers from a federal judge in Laramie naming me as theirs. Drennan's face went still in the way a snake goes still on a rock when something has moved nearby. Federal. Federal. Drennan's right hand drifted slow to the butt of his Colt. He did not draw. He rested his hand on it. Mr. Kettering, I am not a man who wishes trouble. Mr. Drennan, look up. Drennan looked up. On the cookhouse roof, 20 yards to Drennan's left, Hod Yancey was lying flat behind the chimney with a Sharps 50 caliber, the barrel lined up on Drennan's collar. Eli pointed right. On the bunkhouse porch, 2 hands sat with Winchester repeaters across their knees. Eli pointed to the corral. 2 more hands lay flat behind the boards, with rifles laid through the gaps. Eli pointed back at himself, where his own coat hung open over a Smith and Wesson he had not drawn on a man in 15 years. Mr. Drennan, I have not pointed a pistol at a living man since 1873. I would not like to begin again this afternoon. But there are certain kinds of men the world is better off without. I think you are one of those. I think if I shot you off that horse right now, a great many small bad things in a great many small places would quietly stop happening, and not one would weigh on my conscience past supper. Drennan's hand had become very still on the butt of his Colt. He was no longer thinking about that pistol. You have papers from a Nebraska county judge. That is fine. I have wired the federal court in Laramie, the federal marshal in Cheyenne, and the United States Treasury about a fund held in trust for 3 children at the time of their parents' deaths. There will be a hearing in Cottonwood Bend in 11 days. The judge is a federal man and a friend of mine with very particular views about uncles who put their orphan nephews in chicken houses. Drennan's face changed at chicken house. It changed in the way a man's face changes when he understands the hand he has been holding has been visible to his opponent for some time. Now you are going to turn that sorrel and ride back to Cottonwood Bend. You are going to take a room at Mrs. Pruitt's boarding house until the hearing. You are not coming up this lane again. You are not going to be seen within 2 miles of this ranch. If any term is broken, I am going to hear about it inside an hour. Drennan worked his jaw. You think you are king of this country, old man? No, sir. I have a few friends and a few favors and a long memory. I would advise you to start riding before the light goes. Drennan turned the sorrel and rode down the lane. Eli watched until the sorrel had passed the cottonwoods. He picked up his coffee. It was cold. He drank it anyway. Hod Yancey climbed down off the roof and walked onto the porch with the sharps on his shoulder. He gone. He's gone. Send 4 hands down to the river road. Follow him at a distance until he is past the county line. I want a man on the gate day and night for 2 weeks. A man on the cookhouse roof sundown to sunup. A man with Joseph wherever he goes, and a man with Caleb. Yes, sir. Ann came out of the cookhouse with Caleb half hidden behind her skirt, and the other 2 behind Caleb. She sat them down at Eli's feet and did not say a word. Then she went back to her stove because 17 ranch hands were about to come in for supper, and Han Olafson did not believe in letting hungry men go unfed for any reason, even fear. The hearing was held 11 days later. The whole town came. Every pew was full. Otis Greer was there with his hat in his hand. Reverend Crane was there. Mrs. Vesper was there with the Lady Civic League in Sunday hats. The 17 hands of the Crooked K were there, scrubbed by Han herself. In the front pew sat Caleb, Joseph, and Ruth in clean new clothes Han had sewn. Ruth wore blue calico. Joseph wore a small jacket and string tie. Caleb wore a man's white shirt with a collar Han had taken in 3 times. Caleb sat with one hand on Ruth's hand and one on Joseph's shoulder. He did not let go for the whole proceeding. Cobb Drennan sat at the petitioner's table with a lawyer from Cheyenne. The lawyer spoke for an hour about blood and kinship and the rights of an uncle, and about Eli Kettering as a wealthy old recluse who had impulsively detained 3 minor children. He used the word detained 7 times. Eli's lawyer, Isaac Crocker, had come from Cheyenne with 2 clerks and 3 trunks of paper. He spoke for 2.5 hours in a quiet voice. He laid before the bench the deed by which Cobb Drennan had sold the 80-acre farm of the late Mr. and Mrs. Lemuel Whitson for $2,800 6 weeks after his sister's death. He laid beside it the deposit slip in Drennan's own hand, placing the entire sum into a personal account under Drennan's sole name. The trust account that should have held money for the 3 children showed a balance of $0. He laid before the bench 7 sworn affidavits from neighbors. A bruise on the older boy's back. A burn on the middle boy's leg. An evening in September when the younger girl had been found by a teamster on the Sundance Road 3 miles from her uncle's farm, in her nightgown, barefoot in the rain, because she had been put outside for breaking a teacup. He laid before the bench a statement from Dr. Frederick Mortensen, who had examined all 3 children and documented the marks of extended abuse, malnutrition, and exposure. He laid before the bench the chicken house. He laid before the bench an order signed by Federal Circuit Judge Hosea Renton, naming Eli Kettering as lawful guardian. He laid beside it a second order granting adoption, with the 6-month waiting period waived. And last, a sealed envelope containing a federal indictment naming Cobb Drennan on 3 counts of misappropriation of inherited funds belonging to 3 minor children. The federal marshal sat in the back pew in a black hat. The judge read the documents in silence. He looked up. He looked at Cobb Drennan for a slow count of 10. Mr. Drennan, the court finds in favor of the petitioner. Custody of the minors Caleb, Joseph, and Ruth Whitson is awarded permanently to Mr. Eli Kettering. The adoption is granted. The children's surname is amended to Kettering. This court refers Mr. Drennan to the federal marshal on the sealed indictment. Marshal Crowe, the prisoner is yours. The marshal walked up the aisle. He brought irons from his coat pocket and put them on Drennan's wrists and led him out. Drennan did not turn his head as he passed the front pew. Ruth did not understand most of what had been said, but she understood the irons. She made a small sound and pressed her face into Caleb's side. Caleb sat very still after the back doors had closed. Then he turned and looked at Eli, who sat 2 seats over with his hat upside down on his knee. Caleb said very quietly, "Mr. Yes, son. Are we yours now?" Eli did not trust his voice. He nodded. "You are mine now. All 3 of you. For so long as I am living and after." Caleb nodded. He did not let go of Ruth's hand or of Joseph's shoulder. Joseph, who had not cried in front of a man since his father died, put his face down on the pew rail and cried without a sound. Outside on the courthouse steps, half the town was waiting. Otis Greer came up the steps with his hat in his hand. He looked at the boards under his boots. "Mr. Kettering, I have a thing I want to say. About what happened in my saloon a month back." "Say it, Otis." "I should not have done it. The children at my door. They were not asking for whiskey. They were asking for a piece of leftover bread. I have thought about it every night since. I have a boy of my own up in Bozeman, grown now. I keep thinking, what if it had been him? I am sorry. I am sorry to those children most of all." Eli looked at him for 1 second. "Otis, don't say it to me. Walk over there and say it to them. They are the ones you said it to." Otis Greer walked over to the 3 children. He got down on 1 knee in front of Ruth. He told her he was sorry. He told her the back kitchen of the Silver Spur was open to her any day for the rest of her life, and that she would never be asked to leave any door in Cottonwood Bend again. He said the same to Joseph and shook his hand. Then he shook Caleb's hand the way one grown man shakes another's, because in some ways Caleb was already one. Reverend Crane and Mrs. Vesper were on the steps too. They did not say anything as Eli passed. Reverend Crane gave one small nod. Mrs. Vesper gave one small nod. Eli gave one small nod back to each, and that was the end of that. The ride back was slow. Eli drove. Hans sat beside him. The 3 children sat in the bed on a folded buffalo robe. Ruth fell asleep with her head on Caleb's leg before the cottonwoods. Halfway home, Caleb climbed over the buckboard and sat on the seat behind Eli. He did not speak for a long while. He just watched Wyoming go by, gold and brown. A red-tailed hawk turned its head as the wagon went past. Then Caleb said, "Mr. Kettering." "Caleb, you don't have to call me Mr. Kettering anymore. What do I call you?" "That is your decision." Caleb thought about it for a quarter mile. "My daddy, when he was living, we called him Pa. That word is his. I would not ask you for it. We had a granddaddy once. Mama's daddy. We called him Granddad. Could I call you that? I know you ain't. Eli drove another 40 feet. He had to wait for his throat to work right. You can call me Granddad. Yes. All right. Caleb. You hungry? Caleb smiled. It was the first smile Eli had seen on his face since the swinging doors of the Silver Spur. A small smile, like the first flame in a stove that has been cold all winter. Yes, sir. You are not going to ask another man for his leftovers as long as you live, son. Do you hear me? Yes, Granddad. Eli drove up the long lane to the Crooked K as the sun came down behind the western hills, and the river ran silver in the last of the light. Smoke curled from the cookhouse chimney. Hod Yancey stood on the bunkhouse porch and watched them come. 3 months later, on a still January morning, Eli stood in a Sack Crocker's office in Cheyenne and signed a stack of papers naming Caleb, Joseph, and Ruth Kettering as his lawful heirs to the Crooked K Ranch, the timber claim along the Upper Cheyenne, a 6% interest in the copper mine at Mountain Hollow, and a small white frame house in Cheyenne that had been Terz's family's. Asa looked across the desk. Eli, that is a great deal for 3 children. Asa. They earned every acre and every nickel standing under the doors of a saloon on a dusty afternoon in October, asking a bartender for his leftovers. They earned it before I knew their names. Asa stamped the last sheet with his seal. Eli put on his hat. He rode home. That winter Ruth learned to write her name on the flowered kitchen table, capital letters, while hand corrected the curve of the R. Joseph rode Pansy out to the North Line camp and back alone the next spring, with Tully 100 yards behind out of sight, but Joseph did not look back to check. Caleb taught himself to read out of an old copy of Plutarch's Lives, and by the end of his second winter, he was reading the Cheyenne newspaper aloud to Eli on the porch every evening after supper, slow and serious, like he was the foreman of the place. And on Christmas Eve of that second year, in a heavy quiet snow that came down over the whole bend of the river and the cedar shake roof of the main house, Eli Kettering sat at the head of the long pine table in the cookhouse with 3 children in clean wool clothes at his elbow and Han Olafson at the far end. He looked down the length of that table at 3 small faces that had not been there 14 months before, and he took a breath that did not hurt for the first time in as long as he could remember. Because the boy at the back door of the tavern in eastern Kentucky, who had been called a piece of trash and had the door slammed on his shoulder hard enough to tear his only shirt, was 58 years old now, and sitting at the head of his own table in his own cookhouse on his own ranch in his own valley, with 3 children seated to his right and his left, and they were eating their fill of his bread and his roasted goose. And they would not be asked to leave any door of any building in any town in the territory of Wyoming, as long as any one of them drew breath in this country. And no one at that long pine table was ever going to ask another soul for his leftovers again.